first.
We begin with breaking news this afternoon.
Gabrielle, Jane, and John.
And that's when we really start to see the warmer temperatures.
The latest live local breaking news.
Our Joe Ripley is live at the
Today on WYFF. This is an NBC News special report. Here's Harry Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have a situation developing here in Midtown Manhattan. A helicopter has apparently struck the top of a building right in the middle of Manhattan, right in the middle of town, just a block or two, quite frankly, away from Times Square. We have NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis on the scene. What can you see and what do you know from your vantage point?
Terry, what I can tell you is that I'm at the corner of 51st and 7th Avenue. It is swarming with police officers, emergency vehicles, fire trucks. They have cordoned off this particular corner, and everybody is looking up. People have come out of the building, and they're all looking up in the sky. At this moment, I am also doing that, but I cannot see any sign of any flames, nor can I see any images of a helicopter, as you say. There are reports that that a helicopter landed atop one of these buildings. It is very foggy out here. The rain is coming down really hard, and the visibility is poor. So I cannot tell you if there is something atop one of these buildings because I cannot see it. But I can tell you that something is going on for sure. As I mentioned earlier, the whole area is surrounded by police and fire trucks, and they are keeping everybody away from the area right here on 7th Avenue and 51st Street. As we are trying to find out what exactly has gone on here.
Sure. Rahima, is there any evidence of debris on the ground or any evidence of ambulance responding or people that may have been hurt on the ground?
The only thing I can see is that a stretcher has been brought out of one of the ambulances, but there is no sign of debris from where I am standing. Again, the authorities have pushed us back from a portion of the block, and there are emergency vehicles that are blocking my vision at this point. And police, I'm sure, are trying to make certain that all of us on the ground are safe from anything that could potentially fall from the roof of one of these high skyscrapers that are a part of the landscape here in Midtown Manhattan. But I do see at this moment there are firefighters with their oxygen tanks and their hoses, and they are walking right now down 51st Street from 7th Avenue. I don't know, I can't see which building they're about to go in, but it was about 7 or 8 of them walking in a group in the direction of 6th Avenue between 7th and 8th Avenue on 51st Street.
Right. Rahima, thanks very much. It bears repeating, as Rahima said, it has been a dreary, rainy day here in New York. As you look at the pictures on your screen, they're somewhat obscured and blurry, and that's sort of what it feels like on street level right now today in the city. The ceiling certainly very, very low. If, in fact, this is a helicopter, it's probably worth noting for those of you who don't live right around here that helicopter traffic in and around Manhattan is often quite frequent and usually runs up and down the Hudson River, sometimes across the island of Manhattan. Those trips are somewhat less frequent, but as we're trying to piece together what exactly has transpired here in Manhattan at 787 7th Avenue, that's just a block or two away from Rockefeller Center where we are. Lester Holt is en route right now, and he may be able to fill in this picture a little bit better. Lester, how are you doing?
Well, Harry, thanks. That area is in what's known as a TFR, a temporary flight restriction that was established after President Trump was elected because Trump Towers, is only about 6 or 7 blocks away. So it's basically a no-fly zone that has been in effect for the last couple of years. You'll occasionally see police helicopters. New York police have a robust aviation presence, and you'll see them in those areas from time to time. But typically, you won't see the tour helicopters over Midtown Manhattan any longer. In fact, often when there's a news event in Manhattan, the television choppers will shoot on their very sophisticated long lenses from out over the Hudson River or from the edges of Manhattan because they're not allowed in. So that only raises the possibility that it was an authorized chopper in the area. Or keep in mind, it's only a few blocks from the Hudson River, which is a big thoroughfare, if you will, for not only helicopters but small aircraft. There's a corridor there. There have been collisions in the past. We've heard choppers go down both the Hudson and the East River, on the other side of Manhattan. There's a lot of traffic, and there's always a possibility that a disabled or damaged chopper, might have come down in that area, but we don't know. But what we do know, according to a pilot I spoke to a minute ago, this is an area that is off limits typically to air traffic because of security restrictions around Trump Tower.
Okay, Lester, thanks very much. We want to check in with Tom Costello, who knows about as much as about aviation as anybody who reports on the subject. Tom, are you hearing anything, and what do you know?
Now, the FAA, when we checked with them a few minutes ago, didn't have anything on this incident yet, so we continue to wait for their word, and they're going to get the first word, of course, from controllers and also the FDNY. Just to point out, this is a 2-alarm response in the city by the FDNY, and as you know, living and working right in that area, the area is covered, blanketed with plenty of FDNY stations, fire stations. I would make the point that the last time that we had a significant plane crash actually in Manhattan itself was back in 2006, about 12 and a half years ago. We had a small 2-passenger plane, a Cirrus, crash into a building on the Upper East Side. You may recall that there was a New York Yankees pitcher in there, Corey Lytle, was in the plane along with a flight instructor, and both perished in that crash. That was back in 2006. But despite the incredibly heavy helicopter traffic that we often do have up and down the rivers, the East River and also over on the Hudson River in New York City, not a lot of activity, given the volume of traffic that we have up and down Manhattan and around Manhattan, we have relatively few plane or helicopter incidents over Manhattan itself. We've had helicopters go down in both of those rivers, but it's pretty rare to have one go down in the city itself, in Manhattan itself.
I think it bears mentioning, though, Tom, especially for those of us who live in New York, there is a hypersensitivity to any kind of activity that even glances at what happened on 9/11. So, along with what might happen on some seemingly routine accident or mishap, there is always that specter that looms large.
No, that's right. And I was working in Times Square for CNBC back on 9/11, and that was haunting then, and it has continued to haunt the people of New York every single day, the possibility of another attack of that nature. But you're absolutely right. And really, over the city itself, not a lot of helicopter traffic on a regular basis.
All right, Tom Costello will let you get...
One more quick note. I'm just getting a note here. NTSB says so far they are monitoring. So far they have not dispatched anybody. That's not unusual. If it's a lower priority incident, they may not immediately dispatch a GO team. Depends on how severe the situation is. We'll have to see. But I think that by the fact that there does not appear to be debris on the ground, it appears to be limited to the roof. That would suggest that it seems to be contained.
Yeah, and listen, this is all speculation. We're sort of trying to work through this as best we can. It may be an emergency landing.
That's right.
If in fact there's nothing there's no debris on the ground, we don't hear about injuries on the ground, people hurt down below. So that might be the best case scenario that we're talking about here, though we should maybe leave our speculation at that, because there is an infinite number of other possibilities that we might be looking at here. So Tom, we'll let you get back to your sources, see what you can find out. Rahima, we want to go back to Rahima Ellis, who is on the ground just blocks away from us here in Midtown Manhattan at 787 7th to try to see determine what exactly has transpired on the rooftop of this building up there.
Harry, I can tell you I moved across the street, and I'm just about in front of 787 as I'm looking at just a bevy of fire trucks and ambulances and police cars, and there are other suburban police cars, I'm sure, that the lights are flashing. People are looking everywhere, and I do not see debris on the ground. I don't see any indication of anyone being hurt. But again, as you just pointed out a moment ago, it is very early in this incident, so we may get some word.
Stand by a second, Rahima. We want to. Governor Cuomo is speaking to reporters right now. We're listening.
On the roof of the building for one reason or another.
helicopter?
There was a fire that happened when the helicopter hit the roof. People who were in the building said they felt the building shake. The fire department believes the fire is under control. There may have been casualties involved and people in the helicopter.
Do we know at this point how many were on that helicopter?
We do not know. But right now, we believe the fire is under control. Again, casualties involved with the helicopter. We don't know what caused the helicopter to land on the top of the building. But people in the building itself, nobody has been hurt. Some people have been evacuated. This is all very preliminary, and the fire department is just in the midst of responding right now as we speak.
They're
not defining it as either a hard landing or an emergency landing. Just that the helicopter landed on, to use a word, on the rooftop of the building, which caused the fire. So obviously, I don't know, but obviously it created a fire, so it was not a routine landing.
Governor, we're also told that
an aircraft to hit a building in Midtown Manhattan. What went through your mind? What do you presume went through the minds of people in New York?
Well, look, this is, if you're a New Yorker, you have a level of PTSD, right, from 9/11. And I remember that morning all too well. So as soon as you hear an aircraft hit a building, I think my mind goes where every New Yorker's mind goes.
But at this point, there's no indication that
At this point, there is no indication that is the case. The only indication was a helicopter had to do an emergency or a hard landing or crashed onto the rooftop of the building, causing a fire. But there's no indication of anything more than that. Again, this is all very preliminary, and these situations evolve very quickly, as we know. But that's all we know at this time.
All right, Governor, thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Cuomo. We appreciate your time.
That's Governor Andrew Cuomo filling in some of the blanks here on this dreary, rainy, low-ceiling day in New York City, where a helicopter has made what is either an emergency or hard landing on the top of a building just blocks from us here at Rockefeller Center over on 7th Avenue. People said they could feel the building shake. It went down hard. We know there are indications that people are hurt, but as this helicopter went down, a fire started. The fire department, according to the governor, has extinguished the fire. And as of this point, that's what we know. Oh, that's what we know so far. Bill Bratton is standing by, who's the former police commissioner here in the city of New York. Bill, what can you tell us here this afternoon?
Well, the site of this crash is about 2 blocks from my office and about a block from where you're all located. But needless to say, traffic around here is tied up to it fairly well, with emergency vehicles having a great deal of difficulty trying to get up to the scene. But watching the broadcast, it looks like they have more than what they need to deal with the situation. What is unusual about this is that there are almost no helicopter flights directly over Manhattan. There are helicopter landing pads on both sides of Manhattan, but they usually go up along the rivers. It's very unusual for a helicopter to be over the city, other than police helicopters. Very bad weather here today, terrible rain, low visibility, low overcast sky, so that might have been a contributory factor. But as to what this helicopter is one of the tourist helicopters, a commercial helicopter, as the governor's indicated. That's not clear at this particular point in time.
Right. Well, I'm not sure, Bill, if you heard Lester Holt was mentioning, there really is a no-fly zone that has been in effect over, especially this area of Manhattan, which is just blocks away from President Trump's primary residence on 5th Avenue. So that this helicopter would be in this space, at least raises some level of suspicion.
Suspicion, but as the governor's indicated very early on that there'll be a lot of preliminary reports on this, but the first story is never the last story, as we know.
For sure.
You're correct about the no-fly zone issue, but even separate from the hard and fast no-fly zone, helicopters really just, other than police and emergency, just not something you see over Manhattan.
Yeah.
Working in LA when I was chief of police, they were everywhere, but not the case here. So it'll be interesting as to what's the weather a contributory factor to this airship being off course, apparently.
All right. Bill Bratton, former commissioner of the New York City Police Department, thanks so much for your bird's eye view from your office just a couple of blocks away from 787 7th Avenue, which is Midtown Manhattan, just a couple of blocks, as we mentioned, from Rockefeller Center. We've got Lester Holt, who's en route there and has some more information for us. Lester, what's up?
Yeah, a couple thoughts about aircraft in trouble. Now, when a small plane, Cessna or Cirrus, loses power, the pilot's looking around, where can I put this plane down? Is there an open highway? Is there an open field? And they've got the ability to glide for a certain distance, depending how high they are. With a chopper, it's a little different situation. You don't have those wings under you, so you've got to make a very quick decision if you lose. This is a case where you've lost power and perform what's called an auto rotation, which some people refer to as a controlled crash. You're essentially using the stored up energy in those rotors, despite the fact you've lost power, to give you a hard landing, but one that hopefully you can walk away from. That's called an auto rotation. Now, the tricky part about Manhattan, of course, there aren't a lot of open spaces. If you're close to Central Park, perhaps you go there. But when, you don't have much time, and depending on your altitude, to make that call, we don't have, as Commissioner Bratton pointed out, we don't have heliports on buildings here like you'll find in Los Angeles and some other cities in the West. We tried that a long time ago. There was a horrific disaster on what was then the Pan Am building with the passenger chopper. So for a very long time, that's not been the case in New York. But it's just something to think about. This terminology, this hard landing or controlled crash. This might be a pilot trying an auto rotation, and perhaps the only flat spot available might have been on top of the building. Having
been in a helicopter auto-rotating down, there's very little ability for that machine to maneuver either to the left or to the right. Once it starts dropping, it's almost dropping like a rock, right? Yeah, you make the choice. It's one of those, there's no going back. Once you determine that's what I'm going to do, you start coming down. They practice this, but I've never been in an actual auto rotation, but I'm told it's not a pleasant experience. But it may be the better side of an actual crash. But we simply don't know. But I was just listening to the governor's terminology, switching between hard landing and controlled crash, and thinking that might be what he's talking about. It may have just been some sort of flight emergency, but as we mentioned just a little while ago, the sensitivity to this in Manhattan, just for those of us who are around and even those who have come after, it just doesn't go away.
Yeah, this is it's a scary thought. I mean, I think for anyone who flies over Manhattan, as we said, most of the air traffic is small planes and choppers, goes up and down the river. But that whole idea of trying to pick out an alternate landing site, in case something happens, pilots trained to do that. But you just don't have a lot of options in a city as densely packed as New York.
It's pretty interesting, Lester. I'm looking at so many of the pictures that are coming from the street scene below 787 7th Avenue, and we're not seeing a sort of frenzy down there. There's not a sense of urgency per se from a lot of what we've seen, say from the last 10 minutes or so. There's no sense of police pushing bystanders back or evacuation of anyone on a ground level, except perhaps on the sidewalks of the very building where this incident has taken place. So just from the standpoint of the visuals that we're getting here, we're not getting visuals of. We're seeing visuals of a breaking news situation that's winding down, not one that's still in a high degree of caution.
Yeah, it would seem to suggest that everything is contained on that roof. Now, again, a roof of a modern high-rise isn't necessarily stretched through the impact of a helicopter. And, of course, you think about it, there really aren't many flat surfaces. You've got, air conditioning units up there and sometimes, microwave towers, different antennas, all kinds of things that would inhibit a landing per se as we know it.
Yeah. All right, Lester, thanks so much. Stand by. We're going to check in again with Rahima Ellis, who is right on scene there, blocks from us here in Midtown Manhattan. Rahima, what do you have?
Harry, what I can tell you is I am right across the street from 787 7th Avenue. It's a building. I'm going to step away so my producer can show you the building. It's this building right here that we are told that is the site of this accident. If you can pan up, and we'll give you a view, it is just, the rain is just coming down, and what you can see, it's not very much. It's very hazy, it's foggy with the rain. There is no sign of any flames of any sort coming down. I was told, however, that there was some debris that landed on the ground here on the side. And I was also told that people could be seen coming out of this building on the 52nd Street side of the building. And they were escorted to safety. I've seen no indication of any injured parties whatsoever. But as you can see, the fire trucks are here, the ambulances are here, the red lights are going, there are police officers everywhere. We've been cordoning off from moving any further from this area as they're trying to assess exactly what is going on here and how safe this area is or how dangerous it is. But Midtown Manhattan here in this section is jammed. Nothing is moving unless it's got police sirens on it at this point. And I was thinking you might pan to another side where you could just see some of these people that are standing watching. They're also trying to figure out what has happened here.
Gotcha.
Because the police aren't saying anything. So I heard what you mentioned that the governor was talking about that a helicopter that made a hard landing on top of this building that I'm in front of right now.
All right, Rahima, we'll have you stay right there and come back in a moment if we can. In the meantime, if you're just tuning in, wondering what's going on, you see this police presence. This is right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, blocks actually from Rockefeller Center. A helicopter with passengers aboard made what appears to be either a hard or emergency landing on the top of this building at 787 7th Avenue. A fire erupted as a result. The fire department has the fire out. We understand from Governor Andrew Cuomo that there may be injuries involved, the extent of which we don't know. But the reason we're on television right now is that a helicopter which is in basically a restricted airspace, that's a place where people are not supposed to be flying, ends up on the top of a building in an emergency situation in Midtown Manhattan, honestly just blocks away from, well, until Pennsylvania Avenue, Donald Trump's primary residence. There's plenty of reason to urge some caution as we talk about this and just try to piece together what exactly happened. Tom Witter is standing by. He's close by the scene of what happened here this afternoon on this dreary, wet, low-ceilinged Monday afternoon. Tom, what can you tell us?
You said it. I actually just stepped inside because the rain was falling very heavily. I can tell you that the building, I was able to walk right up to it just as police were starting to put up the yellow crime scene tape. And it was difficult at points to see the top of the building. That's how low the visibility, that's how bad the visibility is. And when we first arrived, there was a little bit of light brown smoke still coming off of the top of the roof. But look, here's what we have so far. This is from multiple New York City officials that have been briefed on this incident, is that a helicopter had some sort of a hard landing on top of this building. There was a small fire. The FDNY is seeing that fire is now under control. We know that there's been at least one injury at this time, and I think importantly, and again, all this information is preliminary, it's still in the very, very early investigative stages of this incident, is that there appears to be no criminal component to this. But again, it's early, and there's still some investigating that needs to be done. As you suggested, this is an unusual place for helicopters to be flying in New York City, not something that we often see. As a matter of fact, when helicopters normally fly in this part of the city, we usually get in the press alerts from the NYPD just, advising us, hey, it's okay, this helicopter has cleared it with us,
and they expect to be there either for movie filming or some sort of other reason. So it is a little bit unusual, but if the pilot was in some sort of distress, I think as Lester pointed out correctly, then they would seek to land at the best possible area.
All right. Thanks very much, Tom. Really appreciate it. We want to go to Tom Costello in Washington, who has a little bit more. Tom?
First of all, the FAA is telling us that at the moment they are deferring to the FDNY for information on this, so we don't have anything fresh from the FAA. We do have some new information about the weather conditions at the time in Manhattan, and here's what they're telling us: 64 degrees, east winds at about 9 miles per hour, visibility 1.25 miles. But here's what's important: the ceiling height, which is the cloud height above the surface, only 600 feet. So to give you some perspective, that means the cloud height is about the level of a 55 or a 60-story building. That's really very low. We've got significant rain, kind of a cloudy day here in D.C., and even more so with low clouds and low visibility up in New York today. And even the WNBC Channel 4 helicopter there in New York was not able to take off earlier in the day. You know, one other possibility that they'll be looking at as we discuss why and how this helicopter came down is whether they auto-rotated down. In other words, if you lose engine power, you literally can, almost like a glider, if you will, allowing the chopper itself to kind of feather itself down into what you hope is a softer landing than if you were to crash. So the one question will be exactly what kind of power were they under? Did the pilot auto-rotate down, essentially almost like a glider, but in a helicopter, of course, and trying to come down as gently as possible? And then, of course, why was this chopper over New York City, over Manhattan, and over this airspace that is very close to, if not in, restricted airspace? But, Harry, choppers have not been allowed to land since 1977 on skyscrapers in New York City.
All right, Tom Costello, Lester and I were talking about this auto-rotation a little while ago, and having experienced it myself, feathering is an interesting word. If the bird, inside those feathers was a really, really heavy bird, because when that thing starts going down, it goes down with some significant velocity.
Yes, that's right.
Right, gotcha. Let's check in with John Cox, who is our aviation consultant here at NBC News. John, what do you have?
Well, I think we don't know a whole lot yet. A couple of things with helicopters. There are conditions that helicopters are put in where they have to land now, such as metal chips in a transmission, loss of oil pressure, something like that. And the appropriate pilot response is land right now. And that is possible that that's what this pilot faced, was a I have to land now condition. Tom Costello mentioned the possibility of an engine loss and auto-rotation. That's a possibility. That is something that pilots train for, where they use the forward velocity of the helicopters to keep the blade turning, so that as they get approach to the ground, they can use the inertia in the rotor system to cushion the landing. But it is not uncommon during an auto-rotation that you end up with a hard landing. So we'll need to know what this helicopter was talking to air traffic control, what information they have. So there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers right now.
Yeah. Just so you know, John, we just have gotten confirmation from the fire department here in New York that there is one confirmed fatality. We have confirmation of one confirmed fatality from FDNY. But there's so much that's very difficult to discern here with this very low ceiling. Honestly, the tops of buildings the size of the one what we're talking about would have been obscured on an afternoon like this one, with rain pouring down. The things that you were talking about that may have possibly happened in this helicopter. And sometimes as those little sirens that go off, these engine problem indicators go off in a helicopter, you just don't have a lot of time to respond in a situation like that.
Well, helicopter pilots are very skilled, and one of the things that they train a lot is an unexpected event causing a landing basically within the next few seconds. And it's part of the world of helicopters. So if it's a transmission chip, if it's a loss of oil pressure, the thing that pilot wants to do is maintain the RPM and the blades so that they can make a controlled landing. It's tragic to hear there was a fatality. I'm not totally surprised considering they had a fire. It may indicate that the helicopter hit pretty hard. So, and these are things that the investigators are going to look at, and they'll have answers for pretty quickly. But who owns the helicopter, why it was flying where it was, what was the interaction between the air traffic controllers and the helicopter, all of those will be bits of information that we should have fairly soon.
All right, John, thanks so much. Just to reset for you here a little bit, we're looking at a lot of police activity right in front of a building on 7th Avenue, a couple of blocks from us. You're in Midtown Manhattan. A helicopter has made an emergency / hard landing on the top of the building there. It's a bit substantially sized building, and of numerous stories. We've had some inclement weather here through the afternoon in New York, very low ceilings, heavy rains, and as best we can tell, through what Governor Cuomo said, what Tom Winter has been able to tell us from on the ground there, one of the words that Tom uses, he's talking to police sources that he has, is that there was not a criminal intent. That's all in quotation marks. But there is a hypersensitivity to this kind of thing happening in Midtown Manhattan. And for those of you who may just be tuning in, as we say, this is blocks away from President Trump's primary residence, through which there has been a no-fly zone, a completely restricted airspace for now more than 2 years. So is Lester Holt still available for us?
Yeah, Lester's here.
Yeah, Lester, your thoughts then as this continues to unfold?
Well, first of all, I can tell you right now, I'm about to come in across the Midtown Tunnel under the East River. I've been looking at the Manhattan skyline. The buildings, you see only about the first third of them, so that gives you an idea of the visibility is very low right now. The rain is spiking up a little bit, but it's been a pretty sloppy day. The other observation as I approach this tunnel, typically if there's any threat or any possibility that it's of a terrorist origin, we would see immediate response here at the river crossings, and I see none right now other than the typical heavy traffic. So that jives with what we're hearing about no suspicion of any criminal intent. But it's not a good day for flying. Let me just quickly characterize the kind of chopper flying that we see a lot of in New York City. Of course, the tour choppers that run off of helipads on the East and Hudson Rivers account for a lot of the activity. There are also a number of VIP choppers, like luxury helicopters, for lack of a better term. It's the equivalent of a private jet that some corporate titans take. We see those back and forth. We frequently see NYPD choppers in and around the city. That is about it typically. As others have pointed out, we don't typically see them over the top of the city for not only the security reasons of Trump Tower, but for this very reason. There's not many places to come down in an emergency if something were to happen. As John Cox was talking about, there are those conditions in choppers that mean you have to get down, and you can only imagine the horror for a pilot to look around and see Manhattan. This area is a block or two from Times Square, so if you're in the country, maybe you could set down on a roadway or a driveway in New York City. So if you to come down in the middle of a crowded intersection filled with not only cars but pedestrians, or to come down on top of a building that may have a roof that appears to be flat or an open space. But again, at the low altitudes, we typically see choppers around here. The decision-making would have been down to just a matter of a few seconds.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point. As Tom was talking about earlier, Tom Winter was talking about, in order to fly in this space, you need permission from the NYPD. When we see helicopters over this part of Manhattan, typically it's movie crews who are shooting aerial footage. Otherwise, as you say, either NYPD NBC, FDNY. You might see those occasionally. But as terms of helicopter traffic in New York City, constant up and down the Hudson River with tourist helicopters on the East River. Some tourists also these kind of specialty shuttle services that take VIPs from especially lower Manhattan out to the airports, out to JFK, or out to LaGuardia. We're looking at these pictures of Lester on television of it's really a subdued scene on the ground in terms of there's not frenzy. There's a lot of emergency presence here on the ground, but there's not a sense of, oh my gosh, what's happening next? We've got to secure this place. The foot traffic is moving along. We'd say, there were a couple of sidewalks blocked off in front of 787 7th, and maybe on the side street there also. I think that's 52nd Street. There's a very famous restaurant on the first floor there, La Bernardin, which is a hot tourist destination. People from around the world come to eat out there. We've got Hans Nichols who works Pentagon and White House for us, and he's got some news from us from Washington. Let's check in, Hans.
Yeah, good afternoon. The president has been briefed on this situation in New York. On this, it appears to be a helicopter crash. He is continuing to monitoring the situation. Now, all throughout the West Wing, you see aides glued to the television screens, potentially concerned about what this might be and what the implications could be in terms of national security. Now, there's no indication one way or the other, but the president has been fully briefed. Now, Harry, how this normally happens is feeds come into the White House Situation Room, and then the president gets a briefing from someone in the Situation Room. We don't know where that briefing took place, but we do know that President Trump has been briefed on it. He'll know the area well because Trump Tower is just a couple of blocks from where this hard landing took place. Now, President in the past has shown a great deal of interest in these types of situations. He tries to stay on top of them and monitor them. He will know the area very well and just how close and what a busy area this happened in, because it really is his old stomping grounds. Harry.
Yeah, thanks very much, Hans, at the White House this afternoon. Just to reset again, there's emergency vehicles on hand. We heard from Governor Andrew Cuomo that a helicopter with passengers aboard landed. Here's a new picture that we have not seen thus far. This looks to be the exterior of 787 7th Avenue. It looks like impossible to say if this is a new picture that someone took in the aftermath of a helicopter that made a hard landing / emergency landing, crash landing, if you will, on the top of this building right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. It's just a couple of blocks north of Times Square, several blocks south of Central Park, and just a couple of blocks west of what was President Donald Trump's primary residence. Rahima Ellis is with us now on the ground with more. Rahima, what do you have?
Harry, what I can tell you is that what you were pointing out is that it's not a frenzy here. Take a look. I'm right across the street from the building where this apparently occurred. My cameraman, Ronnie, is panning up so you can see there is no smoke coming from the area. I have been told that, as you have heard from the governor, that the fire that occurred is contained, it's under control, so we wouldn't see any smoke at this moment. You're taking a look down the street of 7th Avenue going towards 52nd Street. At the corner of 52nd and 7th Avenue, we saw people a short while ago coming out of there when this whole thing happened, and they were being evacuated from the building to safety. We have heard reports of injuries, and the word down here on the ground, though, is it is contained, and the area here is completely blocked off. Nothing is moving in this block of 51st, 52nd, and up and down to 50th Street. As these emergency vehicles have taken control of this area, and authorities, I'm sure, are trying to figure out how do they get that helicopter off the top of this roof, and more than that, how to make certain that there are no other injuries. of anyone here on the ground. There was some reports that there was some debris that might have fallen from this rooftop down to the ground. I've not seen any indication of that from my vantage point. But as you can see, we're being kept at a safe distance. Can't walk right in front of the building, but from a safe distance here. The situation apparently is under control, and now what authorities have got to do is try and figure out how this thing happened and to make certain, in terms of people injured or even worse, that that situation is under control. Harry?
Rahima, thank you very much. Rahima has been busy on the ground there, and what she may have missed is that NBC News has verified information from of the fire department of New York City that there has been one fatality on this hard landing and crash up on the top of this building just blocks from here. Lester?
Yeah, I'm in Manhattan right now, and where traffic is moving, typically for a rainy day in Manhattan that we have been in right now. I want to point out, there are reporters who are not seeing any debris on the ground. That doesn't mean there's not debris on other rooftops, depending how this thing came down. And keep in mind that spinning rotor blade and the blade in the back as well. So their investigation will, I'm sure, be looking at other nearby rooftops. There's literally pieces of this tunnel trying to conclude what happened. And again, we don't know how large a chopper this is. Whether this was a business type chopper or a tour size helicopter, but it's going to be an interesting scene in terms of trying to recover as much as they can from the various rooftops around there.
All right, Lester, we sure appreciate it. From us here in Rockefeller Center, it was a moment or maybe, let's say, several this afternoon as we heard about this emergency situation on 7th Avenue and 52nd Street. And the helicopter went down up there. All of us took several collective deep breaths and wondering what exactly had transpired. We've got some pieces of the information now. One fatality, a fire that's been put out. But in terms of emergency response right now, we're not seeing this as an ongoing situation by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of further details, I think we're going to know a lot more by the time Lester Holt gets back in the building here a little bit later on with NBC Nightly News. As for right this moment, for all of us here at NBC News, thank you for watching, and we'll see you with Lester Holt in just a couple of hours.
We now join our regularly scheduled program already in progress.
I'm guessing you're a wine connoisseur.